Hello, my name is Eric Comstock, and this is my video essay submission for the Davidson Fellows Scholarship. So my project is a new method of orbital debris mitigation using magnetohydrodynamic propulsion methods. So orbital debris is a very substantial problem, simply because anytime you launch a satellite into orbit, or anything into orbit really, you're going to have the problems of rocket boosters falling off of the spacecraft because we have to use multi-stage rockets to get up there. We're going to have end-of-life satellites that don't get deorbited, that are just going to stay in space and then potentially pose a problem later. And we're also going to have debris that's produced from satellite debris and debris collisions, because everything in space is moving so fast that anytime something even the size of a paint fleck hits your spacecraft, it could very easily either destroy the spacecraft or irreparably damage it, which in the process will generate thousands upon thousands of new debris fragments. Some of these collisions have happened already. Some of you may have heard of the Iridium Cosmos collision that generated thousands of new pieces of space debris. And there are additionally large boosters up there that are fragmenting and simply producing new debris objects ambiently. All of this poses an existential risk to human spaceflight capabilities, which influence nearly everything that we do in the modern world, from GPS to weather monitoring to agriculture. Almost everything that we do is fundamentally depends on space, and if space renders space unusable, then that would have a huge economic impact on the entire world. So because of this, space debris is a pressing problem. Both NASA and the European Space Agency have very significant divisions that are working on the matter, and recently there's been a very large push towards people who are putting up satellites, including methods of space debris mitigation on them to prevent themselves from being part of the problem. So two of the main methods are deorbiting and active debris removal. The former deorbiting is relatively simple. You just put a thruster on the spacecraft of some sort, and then the spacecraft's end of life. You fire the thruster, and the spacecraft goes back into the atmosphere. This helps mitigate space debris because the less stuff we have up there, the better off we are. However, it can't provide a complete solution because, as I said before, there's stuff that's already up there, there's stuff that's crashing into each other, and there's stuff that's just breaking apart ambiently. So because of that, active debris removal, the other major method, is also needed. Active debris removal, or also known as ADR, is a method where basically we send up secondary spacecraft to latch onto particularly dangerous debris objects, like the ones that are just ambiently breaking up into thousands of more debris objects, and then drag them back into the atmosphere so they can burn up on re-entry and not pose a threat to other spacecraft. So both of these debris removal systems are fundamentally propulsion systems. Both of them rely on dragging debris out of low Earth orbit and into the atmosphere. This is definitely a very effective way of reducing the harm that the space debris poses. But anytime you have a propulsion system, you're going to need propellant for it, and in space, mass is money. So anytime you need to use large amounts of propellant to drag stuff around, that's going to include a very significant cost to your system, and that's also going to include a lot of engineering challenges, because both of these systems are going to require expensive thrusters, extensive fuel containment systems, and a lot of moving parts. So there have been a couple of proposals recently to help mitigate this. Some of the more interesting ones are in the field of atmospheric breathing electric propulsion, or ABEP, which basically is a category of propulsion systems that, instead of carrying their own propellant, extract propellant from the ionosphere through which the spacecraft is moving. This is a very important technology because it basically cuts out half the propulsion system from your mass budget, because you no longer need a propellant tank, you no longer need propellant pressurization, and you no longer need fuel lines, all of which are very significant components from an engineering perspective. The issue with most current ABEP systems is that is that they basically just collect the ionospheric medium through some sort of inlet, and then ionize it, and then funnel it through conventional electric propulsion systems like Hall thrusters, pulse plasma thrusters. In some instances, there have been proposals for magnetoplasma dynamic thrusters. the issue with all of this is that those giant inlets are now another big engineering component, and they also are very, very volume intensive, taking up the majority of the volume of your spacecraft. So my proposal, magnetohydrodynamic propulsion, sort of gives you all of the benefits of ABEP without all of the drawbacks. I mean, magnetohydrodynamic propulsion is very, very simple. Instead of scooping up the ionospheric medium and then firing out of a more conventional rocket engine, it simply applies Lorentz forces directly to the ionospheric medium, which through Newton's third law pushes the spacecraft forward. So, forward in this case would be out of orbit. But this has a major engineering engineering simplicity, simply because there's no giant inlet, there's no ionization mechanism, and the actual engine is literally just a magnet with two wires next to it to apply a magnetic and an electric field to generate a Lorentz force and push the spacecraft forward. So, since this is such a simple system, it's external as well instead of being internal and sort of the core of the spacecraft. This is a system that's going to be very, very easy to implement. It's a system that through my paper I've shown that it's comparable to current ABEP technologies in terms of actual thrust generated and mass efficiency. And it's just fundamentally a lot easier to engineer and a lot easier to just bolt onto an existing spacecraft, which means that's not only very useful for deorbiting, but it's also very useful for active debris removal, since you don't need a big, complicated propulsion system to be integrated with the debris that's already up there. So for that reason, you can just send up a secondary object that just has this one simple component on it, attach it to whatever piece of debris you want to deorbit, and the magnet will just ambiently produce the drag that you need, which will drag the debris down. So fundamentally, this is a very, very important system, and it's a lot easier to engineer and a lot easier to add than current systems due to mass savings, just from not having the propellant on board, and due to its relative simplicity compared to current systems. I can't really stress that enough. The system is just a magnet with two wires on it. You can't really get much simpler than that, so it's very easy to engineer. There are a couple of other applications we're looking at for the system other than debris removal, such as use in interplanetary spaceflight, which has certainly looked promising because of the high conductivity of the solar wind, thus leading to a high effectiveness of our device. It's certainly on the same order of effectiveness, if not more effective than solar sails, so that's a potential area of research as well. Most of our simulations are just taking into account the electric and magnetic fields on the plasma. So Davidson funding would be extremely useful in refining those simulations and pushing this up to a higher technology readiness level, so that we could actually have a convincing enough argument to send up a prototype. Because one of the very important things to try to remember about spaceflight is that it's very expensive. So before this technology can really be implemented or even have like a prototype in space, we need to know fully 100% that this technology works. And right now we've got good simulations, but it's probably going to cost $10,000 to $20,000 at bare minimum to launch a prototype. Probably a lot more than that. Pardon me. And the work that I'm doing right now, computationally, is work that's necessary to convince people that this device can actually work. So that is the main reason why MHD propulsion is important. That's the main reason why MHD propulsion is valuable, and that's the main reason why MHD propulsion is something that needs the funding from the Davidson Fellows Scholarship to fully transition to implementation. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.